Thank you. I would like to call this meeting to order. Thank you. Would like to call. I'm sorry, we're starting the meeting. Thank you. Yep. So can you please take your seat? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So call this meeting to order. Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, thank you very much. I'd like to move a motion. The clerks can put that on the screen for me. One is that, and the motion will be, oh, it's so small. The motion, I think, is fairly straightforward and self-explanatory, but I'll just highlight. Number one, I'd love to make sure that we do work with the City of Toronto's People, Equity and Human Rights Division, especially as they work towards putting an intersectional gender equity lens over the report. And two is to forward a copy of this report to both the provincial and federal governments. I recognize that in the next steps there was mention of the report going to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, but the report going federally was going to go to CMHC, and I think it should sit in the House of Government so that they can take a look at it, not just a Crown agency. And then three, and this is not to slow down the work at all, because I want the work to move at the pace that it should, which is with a level of urgency, but also to make sure that the consultation plan, the bulk of it that's public facing, I heard was going to be in the months of June and July. If we can have that draft of the report at least come back to us here so we can take a look at it, but don't necessarily stop doing the work. Just would like to take a look because that would be helpful in my opinion. And just to thank staff for, number one, the amount of work that they are going to do in the future. Because this is not necessarily before us today. I recognize that we're just at the beginning of the process, but I am aware that the analysis that came before us from the Canadian Urban Institute and the Canadian Centre for Economic Analysis is really putting a pin on a subject matter that we are all going to spend a lot of time talking about. And I think that they've done us a favor, and I'm grateful that the staff were able to commission this work, but I think they've also done us a favor by raising some big red flags that, and in a systematic way that puts it out before us in a fashion that's organized. There are so many different ways for us to address the structural deficits that have led to the housing crisis that's before us. And this is not necessarily because the provincial and federal government are not at the table, although that is a big component of it. There's also the piece around the aging housing stock. The fact that the City of Toronto has largely let the market dictate the rules, to Councillor Councillor Perks's point, and that the fact that we probably have not prioritized our work as well as we could have, to Councillor Bradford's point. And we're going to need a whole suite of tools, really, to address all of it. And over the past year, we found ourselves pitted against this conversation of, do we provide more shelter services because the demand is there? And if we do that, does that mean that we don't have the capacity at the City of Toronto to also work concurrently on long-term housing solutions? Well, of course we do, and especially since now we have a waiting list that seems to have been developed for people who are looking for emergency shelters. That means people who are almost on the street, and I don't know where they are, if they're already requiring emergency shelters, that somehow prohibits them from gaining access. And so that's why I want to say thank you to the staff for the work that they are going to embark on. I know that this is going to be a very important document that's going to guide our work moving forward for the next 10 years. I'm also aware, and I think that we can all agree, is that strategies are only as good as the implementation plan. And we have seen ourselves fall short over the last 10 years by not stepping up to do more when we had the critical opportunities to do so. Whether it's through land acquisitions that are strategic, either through expropriation or just by let's make a deal, or if it's through the fact that we've actually sold some of the best pieces of real estate, not even just before this administration, but last 2, 3, 4 administrations, where we've actually unlocked city assets and said, go to the market and let's get the highest and best use. And we've never been able to extract that triple bottom line community benefit that I think is so critical if we're going to build these complete, sustainable, upright neighborhoods. And so we do have a lot of thinking to do, but I think it has to go beyond us tinkering around the edges And it has a lot to do with us actually smashing the box, not just thinking out of the box. Because if we only tinker, and this is my big fear, is that if we only tinker, everything that the analysis report that's before us has stated will come absolutely crashing down and be true. And if we can't get in front of it now, we're certainly not going to be able to get in front of it in the next 20 or 30 years. And this is where I do want to thank Steve Mahar, who's not here, but I thought he raised a really important point. And that point is that behind the data and all the numbers are people's real lived experiences. And right now, we are not doing enough as a city to adequately address people's suffering. And so therefore, I want to thank staff for the volume of work that they will do to pull it all together for us in a blueprint that will take us forward. And then, of course, we'll have to thank City Council in the future to fund and make sure that it gets done. And so we all have a role to play. I think we should all own it, not just the municipal government or the federal government, but every single one of us who actually says that we care deeply about housing. That's how important it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Wong Tam. And I just want to say a few words. I do want to thank staff for bringing forward this study here and all the work that is ahead of an entire city. When we talk about housing, I think that we're talking about opportunity for Torontonians. You know, if people want to make sure that they can attend to their health, attend to their work, be good, productive citizens of the city, a home is at the bottom of all that. Some place that people can go and feel safe and secure and raise their families is essential for that. So when we're talking about housing, we're really talking about opportunity for our residents and equity for our residents here in the city, and that's why this is so important. As we develop the next 10-year plan and respond to an incredible amount of growth that is happening in the city, but question ourselves, how are we growing? Are we growing in accordance with our values? Are we growing in accordance with what we want this city to be and aspire to be? And I think these are the questions that we should be asking as we develop this housing plan. I agree that we can't just tinker with the outsides. It is true. I think we need to be somewhat provocative and think that, you know, how the way that we're going to solve the different points of the housing continuum, it's not going to be by building ourselves out of this issue or subsidizing ourselves out of this issue. We need to start thinking that, you know, the way that we've been living in today's society is also evolving and changing. And are we actually providing the housing to the new lifestyles that we have and the needs that we have? And for example, are our tax systems responding to the policies that we're creating? You know, the other day I was having a conversation with somebody and we were talking about the development charges for secondary suites or third suites in this case. And we were joking because we said, you know, it's interesting how we're losing population in some of these cities, but we still charge development charges to build a third apartment, but we don't charge development charges to take away those apartments. The much needed apartments that we need, the much needed dwelling units that we need, the much needed rooms that we need. Nobody has ever talked about those things. And I think that hopefully Toronto will start exploring. I'm not saying that this is right or wrong right now, but I think that as we're developing a housing plan, we're going to have to start having these conversations. What are the tools? It's the zoning tools, it's the planning tools, it's the tax incentive tools, it is the subsidies that we have, it is the partnerships with other levels of government, it is the partnerships with the nonprofit sector. All these are going to be, we're going to need to bring them together during these next few months and have this conversation, in some cases in a provocative way, to find some new ways and some new tools to bring to this issue. And I think it's an important conversation. I know that we're going to be reaching out to the four corners of this city. I know that Torontonians want to talk about this issue. I know that, you know, from people with very, very low income are feeling the pain. People in the middle class are feeling the pain. Young people that want to live and be able to continue to work in this city are feeling it. So Torontonians in all kinds of the housing continuum, the housing spectrum are feeling this. And I think it is important that we understand that there's not one solution that is going to solve this issue, that this is a system, this is a continuum, that we need actions in all of these different points, and all actions that are very different at different points. And I hope that we're not going to start putting certain group versus another group. I think that we look at this as a housing system and a housing continuum that needs care, because our whole city needs care, and there's no one resident more important than the other. And I think we need to address the issue as a whole, and an issue that we need to take care of from point A to point Z in the housing spectrum. All that. Can I move the motions as a package? Is that okay? All those in favor? And the item? All those in favor? And that carries. Item 2.4, and we have a quick presentation. Yeah, that is.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. First of all, just to recognize that this report has come at the very last minute, so apologies. The province introduced the growth plan amendments on January 15th, so more or less 20 business days from today. The kind of bylaw notice, ironically, that we give our residents when we're considering a development application. I noticed that. Of course, we've had a long, extended conversation with our residents when we do that. So we're under the gun to try to get you something to consider, and we're anticipating further discussions with the province and likely a supplementary report to City Council. This is the first cut of being able to get you engaged in this conversation. And I'm just going to very quickly highlight the purpose of the report, the policy framework that we're dealing with. Some of you are more familiar than others with our employment lands policies and other effective policies. What we're telling you in this report, what our advice is in our next steps. So first of all, as I indicated, the province has asked us to comment on other affected by the growth plan in the Golden Horseshoe by February the 28th. So we have to get back to them with something from City Council, and this timeline allows us to do that. Overall, I just want to stress that while we are still completing the previous municipal comprehensive review and still at the LPAT, finishing up under the old rules, we have now to consider some new rules. What we are trying to do as much as possible is stick with and apply the council adopted policies that we have in the official plan. The theme, we're not inviting a major change in direction, in other words, with our comments back to the province. We have an official plan that manages sustained growth while balancing all of the community interests, the economy, and the environment. And that very much has guided what we want to, the framework of our comments back to the province. And just a quick 101, we of course have an official plan adopted in 2002, approved in 2006. We embarked upon a municipal comprehensive review in 2013 to look at all of our employment lands, and that's the two sides of the employment lines, ironically, as we discussed this morning. Do we have enough employment lands to meet our employment targets? Do we have enough housing potential to meet our population targets? So that is the package that is now before the LPAT and is working its way through a long litigated process that started in 2013. We also have come to you with a 5-year OP review policies, and the previous committee, your predecessor committee, looked at environment, neighborhoods, transportation, and other matters. We have been working with a growth plan that was updated with new job population and job targets in 2013, and of course the conformity exercise that we concluded with OPA 231 was in response to that. Finally, the growth plan puzzle is completed by, up until recently, the growth plan puzzle is completed by the amendments made in 2017, approved by the province, and now we are dealing with an amendment, what they're calling the first amendment to that growth plan. We have a timeline to comply with the growth plan in 2022, and that includes implementing zoning bylaws. So so I'm going to just lay out a few major tranches of policy shift that we want to bring your attention to, and the report goes through in detail. One of them is something new called provincially significant employment zones. This is what they are proposing, and it basically is looking at what we have in the City of Toronto context, all of our employment lands that are in the official plan that are protected by our policy framework. They've kind of divided it into two piles. One, roughly 67% they put into their provincially significant employment zones, and that would be still subject to an MCR process, but they have excluded about 33% of our employment lands, and they are suggesting that between the approval of the growth plan amendment and Council's commencement of the next MCR, it's possible that Council can consider the conversion of those employment lands. It's significant because, as I indicated, that's 33% of our land base, and it represents 180,000 jobs. These conversions, so the 60, the two-thirds, one-third world, if you will, opens up the potential for Council. And what we have recommended in the report is a series of clarifications. Firstly, on the one-third, we want to be able to establish what I would call a backstop, to use the Brexit terminology, a backstop to these, I don't go there, but to the 33%. In other words, we need to, if they want to create another tier or another grouping of employment lands, we still want to look at those lands comprehensively. We also believe that they've simply missed some important significant areas, including our office parks, the food terminal on the Queensway, Sanofi Pasteur. There are a number of significant employment areas that they simply missed. So we are recommending in the report that we tidy that up in a report to City Council that will accompany this matter. And as I noted, in our office parks, for example, 65,000 people work in our office parks. That's not something that we have to date exposed to speculation in the land market, and we want to be as protective as we can with these areas. The next slide, the agri-food. I've mentioned this as well. The business of agriculture. I noticed it was Canada Agriculture Day today, another irony. And the mapping that has been brought forward to the province fails to include the food terminal. We think, among other amendments, we want to be able to go back to the province with these mapping changes that are important to sustain our local economy. Another major part of the amendment that they're proposing is to take the concept of major transit station areas that was introduced in the previous growth plan, or the existing growth plan, if you will, and look at widening the radius of the major transit station areas from 500 up to 800 meters. The problem set for the city is that we've got about 160 major transit station areas. Maybe about half already meet the minimum density requirements, so we're pretty good, we're in good shape, but many of them do not. There is a work program associated with the MTSAs at the 500-meter range. Opening them up to 800 meters for us is a significant complication of an already big task. We do have concerns about expanding them up to 800 meters, understanding the transit capacity issues that we have in the city and the other infrastructure issues that we have in the city. None of that's been analyzed. So in my mind, this is a bit of a blind that we would go automatically to 800. There's nothing that prevents the city from, in certain areas, going to 800 or having a local planning framework that does call for more density around a transit station. But we think it's a better fit, if you will, for the City of Toronto to stay with the 500-meter MTSA approach. And just to say that there will be more MTSAs. We have not shown on the map other lines and other stations that will come as a result of further transit expansion, Eglinton East and West, for example, and the Relief Line North. So we're looking at keeping up as we normally have with planning frameworks in these growth areas and making sure that we build complete communities. Finally, there are a series of other recommendations in the report. We want the province to require office replacement, set minimum employment standards. These are the types of things that we've started to do in TO Core, in Yonge and Eglinton, in some of the other planning frameworks where we have mixed-use permission. We want to be able to see the jobs materialize in a mandated form. So there's some of the policy thrusts that we've been advancing. There are growth plan amendments proposed to how urban design policy is applied and the strength that the growth plan gives us in the way that we do planning in Toronto, the way that we achieve high quality design. The importance of that for a healthy and competitive city is something that we want the amendment to be modified around, and also how the growth plan policy aligns with our intensification policies in the official plan. As we discussed this morning, we have an urban structure in Toronto, and we want good alignment with that urban structure. So we're going to continue the analysis of the amendment. Obviously, we've been consulting with economic development and legal. We are continuing just tomorrow. We have another roundtable with ministry staff, and we anticipate coming directly to City Council with further recommendations to what's in front of you this afternoon. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Perks?
Thanks. So I have two sets of questions. The first is on these transit areas, MTSAs. You guys have a lot of acronyms in here. On these MTSAs, I've lost the plot. I understood that the province created them and that there was some step that had to happen before the planning regime changed. Has that, what is that step and has it happened?
The step is that we have to conform with that 2017 policy in the growth plan. And so we were embarking, or are embarking, on a conformity exercise to make sure that the official plan and ultimately the zoning in each of those 500-meter areas implements the minimum densities that are in the growth plan. So that step, let's say they weren't amending the plan up to 8 or the growth plan up to 800, that's a work program item that we're embarking on. It's in our work program, and it's a conformity exercise, basically.
Okay, because I've got live applications inside these circles.
Exactly, and as I indicated, we've got about 160 of them in play. Many of them, like for example, we've done the Yonge and Eglinton plan, and the densities in Yonge and Eglinton more than meet the MTSA minimum densities. Mm-hmm. So in many of these areas, we will find, just because we're such a dense urban place, that we're comfortably able to achieve those minimums. Other areas, we may need to introduce more specific area plans that get us those minimum densities.
Okay, and because the transportation or the transit planning stuff falls into your shop, can you tell me where in our major transit system we have spare capacity? Is it nowhere?
That's a trick question. We have definitely capacity problems. That's why we have a transit expansion network plan.
Okay.
Shepherd.
I want to go to the employment area piece. So I was just trying to figure out how I would calculate by creating these conversions of the non-PSEZs. How much wealth does this create for those landholders like that?
Does Mr. Williams have an estimate of the wealth creation? I know.
Create like $1 billion.
This is an enormous wealth creation possibility.
Yeah. Like in the hundreds of millions or billions of dollars?
Yes.
So if I'm some guy, let's just say York Heritage Properties, just,
Don't
sorry,
don't
Bobby,
name-
just picking you at random.
Let's not pick anybody.
Okay, but I'm one of those guys, and I own land in one of these areas. This policy comes into effect. I go through the process. I get converted. The day after I'm converted upzone to a residential use being permitted, the value of my land increases just that day, substantially.
So, yes, but a lot of these places are fractured ownership, so existing industrial things. So there's two issues. One that you're focusing on, which is the up value, and which is very, very significant at multiples of the current land value, significant multiples.
Yeah.
The other thing is, it's going to entice people that are currently owning properties that have employed people to stop employing those people
Yeah.
and convert them to residential.
Yeah.
And that's that, from my point of view, from an economic development point of view, that's even more worrisome.
Oh, I get why that, so I'm going to be going on Twitter a little bit later. Would I be lying if I said that this will enrich people who, if they all get through, the people who own lands in these areas that are identified as a third of our employment lands, that will enrich them in total billions of dollars?
I need to do a mental calculation.
I can wait.
I think it comes back, Madam Chair, to me around the public policy concern, whether or not somebody's going to make money.
I have a public policy concern about that.
Fair enough, but I'm concerned that this creates a departure from what has become an established practice of keeping speculation to the side and putting these matters are no longer appealed, for example. So we've been able to, through a lot of work with economic development and stakeholders, to calm this down over the last 10 years and to ring fence these employment areas. It's not to say that there aren't candidate locations for methodical, measured change in Toronto. There will always be those selected, and we need to always be looking at those, and importantly, ask for jobs when those things happen. So the Celestica example, working through the settlement on Celestica, asking and negotiating and securing significant employment through a regeneration of a complete community. So there's kind of a recipe book for both. There's a recipe book for stability that we've been working hard on, and there is on occasion a methodical way of solving these that we've also undertaken. And we've got to, I think it's working, and it's not, I think, in our interest as a city to go into an unmanaged approach.
You're such a measured, balanced guy.
Thank you. Councillor Bradford?
Thanks very much, and appreciate the tight timeline in turning this around. That's crazy. You have 45 days to get the comments in? Wow. Good thing I left planning. Just through the chair, a couple questions. So OPA 231, we've always held the consistent view employment land conversions are not needed for the growth plan targets 2017. But what I'm reading here is that these changes could have significant implications for our employment lands. Could you give us a status update on the appeals for OPA 231 as it relates to employment lands?
We can, without going into matters that are under litigation, we can give you a general update.
For the most part, through the chair, excuse me, for the most part, the employment lands designations are in effect, and we've brought a series of amendments forward to planning and growth at the time in council last term with respect to policies around hotels. What remains outstanding, however, are our conversion policies and our projections. So that's currently before the LPAT with a hearing scheduled in September of this year to deal with those matters. So we have a 3-week hearing coming up. Parking that aside, we also have a number of site and area-specific appeals, a number such as Celestic and other matters where we have achieved settlements, and we've brought them forward for council's endorsement, and then legal has been able to advance them at the LPAT. So we really have two streams, the policy piece and then individual site and area-specific appeals, which both continue to advance.
So this is what I'm reading here, 67% of what were employment lands could become these new acronym, provincially significant employment lands. What are the policy implications for the balance of that the 33% that would not be these new PSEZs? Rolls off the tongue.
As indicated, the implications are that it establishes, in my mind, a two-tier system where the PZs are going to be dealt with as status quo protections, that the system that we're used to now, whereas the 33% will be open to conversion in the period between the approval of the growth plan amendment, so let's say they approve the growth plan amendment on June the 1st, and council's approval of the next MCR. So let's say council approved an MCR a year and a half from now. So in that window, a window would open where there would be an opportunity to convert. And the growth plan amendment suggests that there should be an approach that maintains jobs in those 33%, so that's good. We want I think, a firmer policy approach. And we also are specifically recommending that should the province go ahead with the 33% impact on us, that we still do a municipally initiated kind of approach for those 33, so that we look at it as holistically as possible, understanding that there will always be the odd little one that doesn't really affect the big policy thrust. We would like to maintain the general approach that it's not initiated by private individuals, but it's something that the municipality initiates and that city council has authority over.
So there's a window coming that is kind of a bit of a pressure cooker for us on the MCR and aligning with the growth plan, and it could be like a year or a year and a half, or
Whenever that window might open after the growth plan amendment gets approved by the province.
so
That would put pressure on us to resolve the matter before the city undertook its next municipal comprehensive review.
do we have, does this notion of the PSEZ compromise our ability to protect these lands then? If we wanted to, like if we wanted to maintain those employment lands to 33%, that's a serious risk?
Well, I think the PZs would follow the normal level of protection that we've been able to achieve.
But the 33% that are not in
The
it?
33%, I think, are more susceptible to change, yes.
Okay.
And that's why we have recommendations in the report about making sure that we put as much land as possible into the PZ basket, if you will, and minimize the two-tier system approach.
Okay. I have a few more for maybe a second round, if we can. Thanks.
Councillor Wong-Tam?
Yes, thank you very much. Just to follow up, so I have a better understanding. If the PZs are not approved on June the 1st, but rather December 31st, or perhaps even into 2019, your window of opportunity, does that shrink in a same corresponding manner? So you no longer have a year and a half to initiate and conclude the MCR?
As far as we know, the way the rules are drafted is that they're introducing the new PZs, pizzas, whatever we want to call them, and that clock starts ticking when they approve it. So I just speculatively said June the 1st.
Yeah.
That's after that time and before council commences its next municipal comprehensive review. There would be an opportunity to look at the conversion of these lands. the province could always come back and say, well, you have until 2023. They could change the window, if you will. Yeah, so there's a bit of uncertainty with, and it is a proposal right now. We don't have the final form of it.
And with respect to the new transit zones, the expansion from, or the MTSA from 500 to 800, recognizing that there's a minimum quantum that has been identified, is there a maximum? Is there a time where there's just too much density? Subway lines and transit lines are at the critical juncture where they can't accommodate any more capacity. Childcare centers are inadequate. Hospitals are full. Is there that particular maximum?
So, yes, through you, Madam Chair, that is the big question that we try to answer every time we do a planning framework. So with Yonge and Eglinton or with TO Core, getting a better understanding of what growth potential there is in those areas, and then developing infrastructure strategies for those areas, and creating a relationship between the amount of infrastructure you need and the growth projection to maintain livability. So that's the formula. And in some of these areas, we will have to undertake, in order to meet the minimum densities, which I'm pretty confident we'll be able to do in a city like Toronto, we will have to look at the development capacity in those areas and whether or not there are infrastructure needs in those areas.
So by way of your proposal now to recommend removing the expanded 800-meter radius and going back to the 500-meter radius, if the province says no, then we have to then live with the fact that these neighborhoods, these centers, these transit hubs could already be at capacity, and we can't say no to further development? Is that what happens?
Well, I think the plan calls for minimum densities, whether it's 500 or 800, but the planning approach that we would take in response to that, because the growth plan also has policies about infrastructure and livability and sustainability, we would be...
A lot of words, yes.
But we would be bringing back to you, in order to conform with the growth plan, we would be coming back to you with not just housing plans, but plans for complete communities. So you're not going to get just plans for new housing units. You're going to get plans in these areas if there's a daycare need or a transit capacity need, if there's a new community center need. So you're going to get a fuller picture back from us about what it takes to build these kinds of densities in these areas.
So there'll be some projected anticipations, and if those anticipated infrastructure needs are not in place, in a total picture review of the development application, we can say no.
We can either say no, or we can say not yet and put an H on it.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, I think it was your 9th page, you identified that you would request to the province an office replacement, just introducing that by way of a new policy and probably setting some minimum standards and recognizing you want to increase the volume of employment space. Over the past term, there's been talk about replacement minimum of hotel spaces, hotel rooms, as we lose these massive hotels by way of conversion to condominium. And at the same time, we're trying to bid for these international global events and including meetings, conferences, and you can't host them in Airbnb. Can we not ask for hotel replacement and set a minimum? As well as there has been conversations around Music City and trying to retain cultural live music spaces. Can we not ask for that as well, in addition to the office minimum requirement?
Insofar as those areas are covered by the growth plan, we could be more specific about those concerns. If the growth plan, and I don't know off the top of my head if it's specific about any of those, but we could add that into areas of policy interest of the City of Toronto.
That would be wonderful if you can. And do we need to move a motion to that?
It might be appropriate to move a motion, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bradford, further questions?
Sorry, just a couple more. Thank you, through the chair. Just looking at page 7 of the report, and, sorry, agri-food network. So the proposed changes are talking about the agri-food network across the province, and Chief Planner pointed out that the food terminal is not identified in the new PZ. But then here on page 7, you also see that City of Toronto in 2012 requested the Toronto Food Terminal to be included. Why did we make that request at the time?
I can address that. One of the strongest growing manufacturing sectors is the food and beverage manufacturing and processing in the City of Toronto, and also the food retail system. Any constraint to the supply network for those industries would damage the city's ability to grow in those areas. The food terminal is located in a highly density pressured area that is, and it was always protected on the south side by 2150 Lakeshore, namely the bakery. It's no longer protected there as much. And so having it as designated as an employment area helps maintain the use of that as a key supply chain cog in the food and beverage system in Toronto.
Okay, so that's why recommendation 4, we feel pretty strongly about that, to include that.
I mean, the alternative, Councillor, is the food terminal would move outside the city, and that would take with it a significant natural advantage that the food system has, especially in Etobicoke, which is a home to the food and beverage industry.
Not what we want. Okay, also office parks, no longer designated employment areas, and would be switched to mixed use designation by default, is that correct?
They would just be, they're differentiated here, they would be in the 33%. So they would be part of the other approach. And we believe, because of the number of employees in these parks and their desirable location, that strategically they're an important part of our employment areas and should be maintained as provincially significant employment areas.
I've just been like trying to get through you do have that number though of the order of magnitude somewhere in there of the tens of thousands of jobs.
I think it's 65,000 jobs in those business parks.
So significant.
It's very significant.
Can I just add to that answer? Sorry. I mean, you take a look at some of the other office areas in the city, namely Yonge and St. Clair, Yonge and Eglinton, and the rapid conversion of office space in those areas. We know that office parks that they've designated, or they want to de-designate, are in development pressured areas. It doesn't take very long for that to happen, and not only does it load up in certain nodes in terms of the transportation infrastructure, it again takes jobs away and forces them in cases outside the city.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, this document and from the province is that we're introducing these changes with the idea to like make planning better and to improve housing affordability. It sort of looks like from the presentation and first glance at that, the approach is MTSAs, Wild West, you know, whether it's 500 or 800 meters. Is there any commentary or proposed changes that will help us deliver housing in other ways other than, you know, whether you call it missing middle or yellow belt or market urbanism or whatever? Is there anything that speaks to other options?
I think there is an approach in the growth plan that we do support, which is to unbundling the MTSAs from a municipal comprehensive review. I think that's beneficial because we will be able to look at a bundle or a tranche of MTSAs as one group and get them brought forward to City Council as individual packages. So it's easier for us, frankly, it's easier for the communities who are affected by those changes. You're going to have one conversation about one transit line and the changes to the official plan and the zoning that are coming all at once, I think that will streamline the conversation and make things better, so we do support that change.
Well, thanks very much. No further questions. Great work on this.
Thank you. Yes, and just, I echo that. It's incredible. I know that many staff were working over the weekend to be able to present this here to the committee today, so thank you. So just a quick, so the 33% doesn't automatically get converted, right? But if this goes ahead, I mean, you would probably see a flood of requests very shortly coming into the city.
We had over 100 site-specific requests
When we did the
last time
MCR.
through, yes.
And this is, they're indicating this would be a one-time, so you could expect again to have a bit of,
Quite a bit of interest, I would imagine, yes.
okay. And again, so this does not affect, so for example, I'm going to give you an example in my area. I have Cadbury completely surrounded by residential, so their piece of land doesn't automatically transfer unless they go through the process, right? So to existing manufacturing, there's no, unless they transferred, there's no risk, correct? Okay, good. With the 160 stations, are we going to be able to ask to have employment as part of the new we are?
Yes, where they exist in employment areas, and many of them do, you'll see, we're seeking to have employment minimum, so it's part of that strategy around having consideration in the.
So they're already allowing us that?
We're requesting it. Just get clarification.
We're requesting it, but also MTSAs that aren't by an employment area, there are minimum jobs and population
Right.
targets. So as part of any planning, rezoning or official plan policies, we would embed in there targets for jobs.
So do we have that power, or we're requesting that power?
No, the policy framework has a target for it, so we would then embed it in policy.
Okay. And you said the 500-meter study is undergoing, so when would we expect to see that coming to committee? For the 160, or at least the first?
So they are on our work program, and we were doing some preparatory work to commence that. And what's helpful here is that they're suggesting they come in bundles. So I would imagine you'll start to see some of them beginning of next year.
Okay. And when you say, so what you're asking is that at least the bare minimum, the province allow us to do a thoughtful study on the 33%. And how long would that be? So if the province asks you, okay, fine, City of Toronto, go ahead, do your study, how much time do we need to do that study?
Frankly, haven't really considered that question, other than we have, it won't be as complicated as the first MCR, obviously. You're dealing with a smaller set of employment lands. You're dealing with a lot more knowledge around our housing issues and our population projections. All I'll say is that it'll be a much condensed process, but I'd have to consider more.
Okay, so maybe I can ask you this question again at council, and then you have an answer for me.
I might
You might.
I might work on an answer by then.
But so what we're asking at the minimum from the province is if they're going to go ahead with this policy, that we have, this is the minimum, that we have an opportunity to study these 33, and if any conversions, that we at least get the coverage of employment that we have.
Get the coverage of employment, but also, I think importantly, have a municipally led one-time window so that we don't
look at-
have a kind of
Fire sale.
uncontrolled event going on.
Okay. Thank you. Speakers? No?
I just want to
Councillor Wong-Tam.
Just to clarify, not to clarify, but just thank staff for the report, also just the fact that they moved so quickly and unpacked it in such an accessible way for us. I think that was incredibly helpful. I really hope that the members of council will have just as much time and with your maybe perhaps have the same presentation opportunity at City Council, because this is going to affect many communities, and I just hope that some of our colleagues will be able to turn their heads to it. And also just to explain that I will not be moving the motion I was speaking about, because Carrie was very good to advise me that they needed a bit more time to really finesse that language. So I'll be moving that at council instead. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And in closing, just once again, thank you. This is very important work in our city. You know, we are finally growing in jobs, not only growing in population, and I think everybody wants to maintain growth on both areas, and this is really important work to make sure that that happens. Thank you. Motion to receive? Adopt, sorry. Councillor Wong-Tam, all those in favor? Oh, no. No, receive. And that carries. Carrie almost had a heart attack. She's like, what is this woman doing to me? And next item, it is providing certainty to the planning appeals process, clearing the backlog at the LPAT. If I can move that, all those in favor? And that carries. And review and consultation on the laneway suites bylaw and policies. All those in favor, and that carries. And that's it. Motion to adjourn. Thank you, staff. Thank you, and drive or take the TTC or walk safely home.